Hello and welcome to the Paper Prototypes podcast. I'm here with Jason Smith, programmer of Cultic. Jason, why don't you walk me through what made you decide you wanted to make Cultic?
Well, I kind of always wanted to make a game like Cultic because those are the kinds of games I played growing up. Excuse me. I played like build engine games and Doom 1 and Doom 2 and Dark Forces and such on my old family computer growing up. And even when I got into game development when I was like 12 or so, I was only doing 2D stuff and I had no idea how to do 3D games like that. So, I just kind of had to keep putting it off. And even when I got into Unity and started messing with 3D stuff in 2016 or so, I still just didn't quite have the programming chops and the art, my art skills weren't there yet. And I don't want to take this game that I've been wanting to make for forever and make it anything less than like what it is in my head. So it just kind of kept getting put off and put to the side. And then I was working on a just like kind of like a pipeline for taking 3D models and rendering them out as sprites and like trying to find a way to do that was like easy to do and also produced like half decent results. And that was kind of some of the first posts that happened about Cultic back when it was just kind of an art test. And those posts kind of picked up a lot of traction. I mean, this was back when I didn't have like any followers on Twitter at all. And so if I posted something, it would maybe get like 7 likes, on average. And then I went from that to posting these, and these are getting like, 70 and 150. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I'm onto something here. And that was all I really needed to finally get started on Cultic. And now, of course, it is where we are today. And it's been a wild ride.
So, is Cultic your first published project, or have you worked on other things?
It's my first completed commercial project. So I've worked on oh God, I've probably worked on like over 200 games in my quote unquote game dev career. Most of those ranging from other games that may have been like a viable commercial product if I kept working on them. Most of those probably within the last like 5 years, ranging to just like, stupid little sprite games using sprites that I stole off the internet. So like, yeah, I've worked on a ton of different little projects and prototypes and ideas, but this is the first one that ever really turned into anything. Besides, of course, Graveyard Shift 2, which I'll never replicate that success ever. It's my best game.
And how long did it take you to develop Cultic?
So I started on it in January of 2021. So chapter one was completed in just under 2 years. So that was from January of 21 to October of this year.
Was there any stress, and since this is your first commercial project in a game you've been making since a kid, well, you've been wanting to make since you were for a little bit, was there any
Mhm.
stress that this wouldn't be like come out the way you envisioned and it'd be kind of a flop or maybe not what you wanted?
Um, Definitely when I first started on it, it took a really long time for me to kind of find my footing in terms of like the art for Cultic, but also like the gameplay that I wanted. Anybody who played the original demo from the first or from Realms Deep last year, versus like the Next Fest demo that came out this year, there's like it's a huge difference in like how they look and how they play. A lot of the themes and like the general flavors are still there, but the older art style was much, much crunchier than it is now. Like it was like a much lower resolution, and the color palette was far more limited, and it was much darker. Had much more of kind of like a dirty, grungy horror feel to it than it does now. And also, like all of the environments were much more smaller. Like everything was kind of more compact, which originally the game was supposed to be like kind of a slower paced, a more compact shooter. But as I developed it, I really found myself wanting more like mid-range combat and giving the player a little more options in terms of movement, so they weren't just kind of slowly plodding around the whole time. And so that first demo, I wasn't. It went pretty well, and like a lot of people really liked it, but it still wasn't like quite what I wanted. And so I went back and like retackled all of the art and like redid all the enemy sprites and redid all the weapon sprites and messed with the color palette a whole bunch, and and just kind of like tweaked it. So it was a little scary when that first demo came out because it was starting to gain traction, and a lot of people were starting to notice it, but it still wasn't what I wanted it to be. But luckily, by around January of this year, I had finally kind of like found a good footing in what I wanted it to look and play like.
How did you decide between what objects were going to be more 3D and more were going to be 2D? Because I think my favorite Easter egg I found was a tent that said, "This one looks different from the rest." It's very, like, pixelated 3D modeled.
Yeah. Yeah, so the idea was one thing that I've never liked about not that this is like a problem with Doom or Doom 2, just like a limitation of, when they were made, but one thing I never liked about games that are 2.5D is when you have props like the kind of like the hanging corpses in Doom, or like the big trees in Doom, that are like these objects that are supposed to be environmental objects, but they're just like clearly, they're just billboards, and that always really like kind of took me out of the game a little bit. And so one thing I've always liked in like modded like build engine games, or even in like Half-Life 2 custom campaigns and stuff, is when people get really creative with the map editor, and they manage to make things like vehicles and just all kinds of things that weren't really possible as like an imported model, but they managed to like make it look half decent just by making it part of the map. And so the idea behind Cultic was kind of like, if it existed in this in-between space, like a little more advanced than the build engine, but not quite the full 3D polygon engine that like Quake ran on. And so it kind of exists in the space of like a fictional engine that never existed, where um, like some things could be done just in the map editor. So things like the trees, the big tall trees are meshes, and like the tents are meshes, because those you could feasibly model those in a map editor, right? But then stuff like vehicles, or physics props that need to move and aren't just static objects, those in this fictional engine could be imported as like a voxel object, so like not quite a full 3D model. And so it wasn't like a hard and fast rule, but that was kind of like what guided that look. And then of course the voxel tent is just to call back to the original demo, when I had made the decision to switch all the tents over to polygons just to save on some resources, but I had like forgotten to convert one or two of the tents to meshes, so like most of them were 3D models, but then like two of them were still on a voxel. Like, what is he? Can you interact with it? Can you break it? And smaller, like everything was kind of more compact, which originally the game was supposed to be like kind of a slower paced, a more compact shooter. But as I developed it, I really found myself wanting more like mid-range combat, and giving the player a little more options in terms of movement, so they weren't just kind of slowly plodding around the whole time. And so that first demo, I wasn't it went pretty well, and like a lot of people really liked it, but it still wasn't like quite what I wanted. And so I went back and like retackled all of the art, and like redid all the enemy sprites, and redid all the weapon sprites, and messed with the color palette a whole bunch, and just kind of like tweaked it. So it was a little scary when that first demo came out because it was starting to gain traction, and a lot of people were starting to notice it, but it still wasn't what I wanted it to be. But luckily, by around January of this year, I had finally kind of like found a good footing in what I wanted it to look and play like.
How did you decide between what objects were going to be more 3D and more were going to be 2D? Because I think my favorite Easter egg I found was a tent that said, "This one looks different from the rest." It's very, like, pixelated 3D modeled.
Yeah. Yeah, so the idea was one thing that I've never liked about not that this is like a problem with Doom or Doom 2, just like a limitation of, when they were made, but one thing I never liked about games that are 2.5D is when you have props like the kind of like the hanging corpses in Doom, or like the big trees in Doom, that are like these objects that are supposed to be environmental objects, but they're just like clearly, they're just billboards, and that always really like kind of took me out of the game a little bit. And so one thing I've always liked in like modded like build engine games, or even in like like Half-Life 2 custom campaigns and stuff is when people get really creative with the map editor, and they make, they manage to make things like vehicles and just all kinds of things that weren't really possible as like an imported model, but they managed to like make it look half decent just by making it part of the map. And so the idea behind Cultic was kind of like if it existed in this in-between space, like a little more advanced than the build engine, but not quite full like the full 3D polygon engine that like Quake ran on. And so it kind of exists in the space of like a fictional engine that never existed, where like some things could be done just in the map editor. So things like the trees, the big tall trees are meshes, and like the tents are meshes, because those you could feasibly model those in a map editor, right? But then stuff like vehicles, or physics props that need to move and aren't just static objects, those in this fictional engine could be imported as like a voxel object, so like not quite a full 3D model. And so it wasn't like a hard and fast rule, but that was kind of like what guided that look. And then of course the voxel tent is just to call back to the original demo when I had made the decision to switch all the tents over to polygons just to save on some resources, but I had like forgotten to convert one or two of the tents to meshes, so like most of them were 3D models, but then like two of them were still voxels, and people were like, most people were like, "This is a was it me? And why is this one a voxel? Like, what is he? Can you interact with it? Can you break it?" And I just decided to immortalize that because it was a way bigger deal than it should have been, which I always thought was really funny.
So, did you choose the art style you have going forward because of just like nostalgia purposes, or do you think it actually influenced the type of genre that you were working with, being horror?
So I mean, obviously, since this kind of, growing up playing games like that, and and wanting to make a game that kind of reminds you of those nostalgic feelings, that definitely, made the decision to have it be like 2.5D, like a pretty easy one, because obviously you could have very easily made it like just a regular 3D game. And part of that was just like wanting Cultic to be something that's a little more unique. Not saying, of course, that it's like the only throwback shooter that uses sprites, but like the use of voxels and the use of the color palette and stuff like that. It's all it's not something that you usually see other games doing. And so part of that was just like wanting to make it something distinct. And that was kind of the entire point of the early like model conversion test, was just trying to create something that was, that looks unique, because I didn't want that like marathon-esque look where it's like, okay, this is clearly just a 3D model that you turn into a sprite and there was like no other work done to it. Um, so it wasn't so much about like using that style to get a particular like horror vibe, as much as it was create something that was unique but also like had that same nostalgic feeling that I remember from like playing his games when I was a kid. So it's not exactly easy to kind of pinpoint one thing that made that decision happen, but there were a lot of influences there. And I've talked about before how the Pico 8 Doom port called Poom was a big inspiration for the color palette early on, because like I just thought it was really cool that they managed, or whoever created it managed to kind of recreate Doom's like gritty sci-fi horror feel, but using Pico 8's like really vibrant, colorful like palette. And so I was like, man, that'd be a really cool challenge to like create a game that has that kind of like grimy atmosphere, but has like splashes of really vibrant color in it as well. And so that was kind of the starting point for figuring out
I
the aesthetic for Cultic.
Looking at the game, I didn't even they ported it to Pico 8.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's not like a straight port, so it's not like the full game. But they managed to make a version of Doom in Pico 8, but it's not like the full game.
Oh, that's sick as fuck. I love it.
Yeah, and it has a really unique look. And I was like, man, I would love, because I've always been someone who like I really like a good color palette. It's one of the things that's like one of the things I love about like Super Metroid, other games, is this like color palette. And one thing that I like really like about Game Boy Advance games is they always have that like there's always like that Game Boy Advance look to them because of the color palette that they've got. And it's like that's always like a big part of like my nostalgic memories and like the aesthetic of a certain game is like the color palette. And so that's really something I wanted to be able to nail on, which I
Were
failed at because I redid the color palette like 30 times.
Were you at all ever worried about the, how would I say, readability of the map? You have snipers in the map, you've got people in dark colored robes. How did you end up working that out so the player can clearly see the enemies without it all becoming a blur of browns and grays?
Yeah, so you asked earlier, like what kind of stuff like made me nervous or worried working on it, and that was a big problem in the early demo. Because I mean, the game was supposed to be like a kind of a dark horror inspired game, but when it's like when you've got 32 colors and a quarter of them are brown, and and you've got enemies in dark clothes, in dark corners, in shadows. Yeah, it did all really blend together. Um, and so that was a big part of expanding the color palette was I was like taking screenshots of different parts of the game and identifying areas where like stuff was blending together and figuring out like, okay, what color could have been used there that would have made this not blur together. And so I took the color palette from being like 32 colors and expanded it up to, I think it has 44 right now.
Mm.
And a lot of that was just adding in transition colors that where like like this goes from you can see the cultist to the cultist is completely like blurred into the background. And if you just add one color in there, then it makes them stand out way more. And then another big part of that was enemies, the shader that like renders their sprite in the world, it ignores a certain percentage of like the ambient light in the area, so that enemies are never at the same light level as like their surroundings, which kind of helps them stand out a little bit more as well. So like even if a cultist were standing against a background that was the exact same color as them, they're rendered slightly lighter than everything else, just by like one shade. And that really helped with visibility as well. So like those two changes to the color palette and then to the shader like that's like a huge night and day difference between just the original Realms Deep demo and then the next Fest demo.
Was trying to do the readability and coming up with the color palette, was that the hardest part of developing Cultic, or was there a different aspect that was much harder?
I wouldn't say it was hard from like a difficulty perspective, and like I mean, because I mean, adding colors to the palette is easy, and it was just kind of like a guess and check until it looked good. The harder part about it was just like it meant a major departure from what my original idea for the game was, and so it's kind of like it's not just admitting that like oh there's a problem with the game. It's like there's a problem with my vision. Like what I had thought of for Cultic isn't going to work, and people and a lot of people are pointing that out. So you kind of have to like set aside what you had in mind and kind of go back to the drawing board a little bit, and that's always really tough to do. But I think like the level design was probably the most difficult part for me, just because I had zero experience with it. Like all the games I'd worked on before Cultic were either extremely small, like concepts that never actually made it into full development, so there wasn't any level design going on, or they were like roguelite procedurally generated games where I was just making small set pieces and then letting the game kind of stitch them together. So Cultic was the first time I have ever done like full like end-to-end maps with like multiple paths and open areas and like actually designing set pieces that you have to link together yourself and like guiding the player but without hand holding but without letting them get lost. And it was a big learning process.
What about making combat arenas? I've noticed there's 3 survival maps, and one kind of plays into the campaign, as to say.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of I don't really know that I have like a definitive set of rules for like making combat arenas, because a lot of them I would just kind of like you just like start with a basic shape, like like oh this room is going to be a cylinder and it needs to have a door here and here, and that's how the player gets in and out, and then you just kind of go from there. Because I just like I'm not great at like doing concepts beforehand. I'm more like my dirty kind of person. So I mean a lot of the I just would start out with idea for the set piece, like the arena at the end of 2. I that kind of goes around the outside, and like you want there to be multiple paths. Like if someone doesn't take the mine cart, like what other path could they take? And then you build the stairwell that goes down, and then you have like the branch that goes off of that. If like, oh well, if they don't want to get down and dirty, they can stand on this like center platform and kind of have an advantageous position. And so it's just it's just kind of like starting with a very, very basic concept and then just adding on to it until it is what I want it to be, which is like the same way that I do like music and everything else. I'm a very poor planner. I just kind of like jump in and fly by the seat of my pants.
So, you would say a hard part of designing the levels would be trying to play around the different play styles of the players as well.
Yeah, I mean that's with Cultic being kind of a play however you want to play it kind of because that was a big goal of this developing Cultic was that like one trend I don't personally like in the retro shooter wave that's going on is all of the games that take inspiration from Doom Eternal in that it's like you have to play like a very 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 strict set of rules and you have to stay on the move and it's very high pressure and that's not to say that those games aren't good or they're not like made by talented teams but for me personally like I don't like games like that they stress me out and I don't like being confined to that narrow of a rule set and so it was like, developing Cultic was more of a making a game that's a little more accessible to people like me who suck at the fast-paced, super tense, like sitting in your chair sweating by the end of each fight. It's just not really fun for me personally. So a lot of developing Cultic was like, how do you make this as accessible as possible without like compromising on difficulty? Or like making it an absolute walk in the park to the point where people who like challenging experiences don't even want to play it. And so that that brought about the kind of the open-endedness of those combat segments where you can just like sprint in and just like spray and run around and jump and just dodge bolts the whole time. Enemy bolts aren't hit scans, so you can dodge them, and all the enemy attacks are telegraphed, so you always know when they're coming. But for people who don't like to do that, you can also like like take advantage of cover, or you can use TNT to like set traps and lure enemies into them, or you can just find a good sniping point and just like pick people off one by one. And so it's just when you have like when you have things that are working in the player's favor, and it's not just like every mistake is punished to the point where there's just no experimentation in the combat at all. It really helps to bring that open-ended experience together. And I guess like some examples of that would be like there shouldn't really be any situations in Cultic where you're running around at like one health and the next shot is going to kill you because not only does your health like regenerate up to 25 hit points, but you have one hit KO protection if you have like if you're like above 25 health and you get hit by a really heavy attack, it'll leave you at 1 HP instead of outright killing you. And so just like little things like that are like always kind of working in the player's favor in the background. I feel like I'm just gonna like keep rambling about this on and on and on. All these little things that are that are going on in the background, but
Oh, it's the point.
like
It's the podcast. We gotta let the viewers know how you made the damn thing.
well, yeah, it's just it's like I'm not it's like when people ask me about like writing the music for Cultic, like I'm not like a trained composer. I can't even read sheet music to save my life, and so much of what I do is just like I'm gonna try this, and if it works, great, and if not, I'm gonna try it again. It's like and that's one of the reasons why working on the game solo is like the only way that I can operate because I can't tell a team of people how to make Cultic because I don't know like I don't know what I don't know what I want it to be in every single aspect. So, it would be people that wind up hating me because I'm like, no, not like that. Well, I don't know how I want it to be, but not like that. And I don't want to subject anyone to that. So it's hard to, it's hard to be like, oh yeah, I sat down and made this gigantic design document with a million flowcharts, and I had knew exactly what I wanted the combat to be before I ever started the game. Because anyone who's played like just the demos and seen how much they changed would know that's not true. But yes, like accessibility and kind of like being able to choose your own route through different combat scenarios was always a big focus for me. I always like to cite oh gosh, Hitman Absolution, which I think was the one that came out before the recent like big episodic one. And the billing for that game, like the marketing for it, was very like like play your way. Like, do you want to be like the world's best assassin, or do you want to go in guns blazing? And it was like, oh, that's awesome, because like I suck at stealth games, so like having one that has a lot of like creative and open-ended ways to go through the missions, that's like right up my alley. Like it doesn't require stealth. And then you get into the game, and every single like progression unlock is locked behind playing the game the stealthy way. So it's like yeah, you finished the mission, but because you didn't do it this way, and because you got alerted, and because you killed 10 people, like you don't get any upgrades. So you have to continue going with the basic equipment. And I was like, nope, I'm not playing this anymore. So it's like that's the kind of stuff I don't want to do.
But are you at all worried about people potentially cheesing their way through the game and not having fun by doing that? Because that's kind of the big strategy that Doom has, is, or at least the newer ones, is that by forcing the player to play aggressively and not hiding behind a wall, it kind of brings out the most fun aspect. And a negative thing I saw about when I was looking at reviews of your game was that some players felt like they could hide too much behind using, let's say, the lever action too early on, and snipe and not really have to engage with the maps too much.
Sure. So like you can't really stop somebody from cheesing an aspect of your game. Like if somebody finds a way to cheese something and they're comfortable doing it, then like you can't really stop them. Like playing like Elden Ring, which I'm not good at Souls games, but I like finally managed to beat one because Elden Ring was so accessible. And there were ways that you oh good, like this is a way that a game that normally kicks my ass, I can actually progress past this part because there is like an exploit I can use. And so it's within my power. I'm not somebody who's like hinging my entire gamer credibility on like whether or not I beat this boss the legit way, or whether I use an expert. Like I don't really care. I bought the game. I'm going to play it however I want. And it's like it doesn't really matter how, like, especially in a game like Cultic that has quick saves, like it doesn't matter how much you like remove all hiding spots and remove all advantageous positions and remove every single element that works in the player's favor, because at the end of the day you could just save scum your way through it. And so it's like that you then also remove quick saving, like just because even if the game was as tight and brutal as like Doom Eternal in terms of like difficulty, if you still have quick saves, then it doesn't matter. Like if I get hit by an imp that I didn't see, I could just load my save and go on. And then the argument's like, well, are you having fun by save scumming? And for me, yes, because I like to maximize my resources and kind of like, and not waste things needlessly. So I'm totally fine with safe scumming in games. It never bothers me. So it's like, at what point do you stop removing things from the game in order to create, like a far more tailored experience towards people who don't want to exploit anything and don't want to use like anything that might lean like too heavily in the player's advantage. So I don't know. It's kind of like that same accessibility argument for like Dark Souls games in general. Is it's do you, if you add an accessibility mode that makes it easier for players like me who suck at games like that, like are you compromising the vision of the game just because you want just because you want more people to be able to play it? And that's like I'm not going to get rid of balanced points in Cultic's gameplay, things that, especially things that lean in the player's favor, just because some players like think they're too easy. Because I'm not making a game that's geared towards the hardcorest of the first person shooter players, because there's already so many games out there like that, and that's just not really what I'm setting out to do. But it is a tough one. I mean, that's that whole like difficulty versus like accessibility argument that people go on and on and on about.
I personally would get into more bullet hells because I think they're so fun. But sometimes the
Hmm.
skill ceiling is so high. I'm like, I don't have the mouse accuracy to be moving and doing this like all the time.
Yeah, yeah, and see, but I don't like bullet hells because A, I suck at them, and B, they stress me out, and so I'm just like I don't. And like when you read like positive reviews for Doom Eternal, and people are like, oh yeah, by the end of a boss fight I'm like shaking and drenched in sweat, and I'm like, I don't want to be either of those things at the end of a boss fight. It's just not the kind of experience I want to have. And so yeah, I mean there are going to be people who I mean I had an interaction with oh gosh, I don't remember what platform it was on, if it was Discord or Steam or whatever, but like some guy was really really upset because the pistol is so accurate. He was like, well, like like I just hide and snipe all the enemies. And I'm like, okay, like that's fine. That's an option. You can do that. The pistol's a good gun. Like there's no reason you can't do that. And he's like, well, like the game is ruined for me because I like, because why should I go in and fight enemies up close when I can just snipe with the pistol? And I'm just like, I mean, yeah, like is the argument that I should make the pistol crap so that like you can't use it at a distance? Like I'm not really sure what the point is. Like you can play Fallout 4 with a silent sniper rifle and like never alert a single enemy to your presence, but like I think that's fun. Like I
So it sounds like you don't really like playing a lot of games that make you anxious, and yet you made a horror game, Jason. Why on God's green fuck did you decide to do that?
Well, I don't think it's as scary when you have a shotgun between you and all of the enemies. But also, like when you're the one making the horror game, it's not really all that scary. But I maintain that Cultic is more of a horror flavored shooter than it is like a straight up horror game, and I know that you'll disagree with me on that. But
I don't know about
um,
that. I just think I'm a pussy in some areas terrified me.
yeah, yeah, and that's honestly like it's one of the most fun parts about it is kind of like a horror light experience. Like there's no like real there's not very many like jump scary type moments. There's no like big in your face like Five Nights at Freddy's stuff going on. And, like the cheapest thing you'll encounter is like maybe an enemy spawn that you didn't like expect them to be there, but because of that, it's kind of like just like the accessibility of Cultic's difficulty allows people who aren't usually like retro shooter veterans, it allows them to play and enjoy a game in that genre. It kind of also allows people who aren't normally like horror fans to kind of experience a dark, gritty, horror flavored game, but not one that's going to be like jump scaring them every 5 seconds. Um, and that's kind of like what I get a lot of, like going to Gamescom and seeing people play it publicly or watching people stream is it always feels really good when someone's like, well, I'm not normally like I don't normally play shooters, but like I really enjoyed this. Or like normally I can't play horror, but I like really enjoyed, like the tension from this, and that's always nice because when you're designing a game around like a broad appeal, it's nice to see that you've successfully drawn in people who aren't usually fans of the genre and they still like enjoy your game. So that's always really nice. But yeah, I don't think it's that spooky of a game. But I have watched enough people play the demo and the first map of the game that I can tell you you're not alone in like finding those moments really unsettling. It's always fun to watch people's first encounter with the harvester. It's like one of my favorite things to watch.
What's it like trying to make maps that are somewhat horror esque? Because there is the harvester, but it's also the first time you see the ghosts, and
Hmm.
anytime I see the thing that reminds me of the fucking gaping dragon with a fucking mouth down its chest, that thing terrified me the first time I saw that. I just unloaded so many sticks of dynamite to get that thing away from me.
Yeah, it's you kind of have to like you kind of see the game like the maps that are more horror focused are the ones that really pull like the scope of the map down. Like the Asylum, for example, which is really like the most focused horror set piece in the game. It's a much smaller area, and it's where like the player's movement and their agency is limited much more. Because like it's hard to make the player feel tense or like on edge when they're out in like the wide open spaces of like map 1 or map 7. Like when you can just like kick boost away from all of your problems, then it doesn't there's not really a whole lot of tension to be had there. So if I decided that I was going to make a horror set piece, like I really want there to be kind of like a spooky bit in this level, then it changes the design in a way where you have to figure out how to naturally like how to like naturally settle into a horror set piece, kind of like the like in the first map. You've got this big action-packed combat arena, and then you kill the last enemies there, and the music fades out, and then you walk into this tunnel, and like now you're okay. Well, now I have to drop in this big hole, and I don't really want to do that. And then you drop into the hole, and suddenly you're moving really, really slowly because that hole is full of bodies, and so you've got to figure out ways to like transition the player from action into horror, but not in a way that's like super painfully obvious. And so like I don't know if I succeeded at that or not, but that's kind of the idea is you have to like plan those levels out to the point where that like on the ship, like the shipyard, you're talking about the first encounter with the ghost.
Mm-hmm.
Like obviously when you first get into the shipyard, it's very wide open. But you know, like if I want players to go into the ship, then that's going to be a more confined area. So that would probably be a good opportunity for like a horror set piece while the player is a little more confined. And so just kind of like planning the levels around it, you find like those really good opportunities adding in, especially if you know the player is going to be like slowed down, or if you know like oh gosh, I'm trying to think of a good example. I guess the shipyard is still a good example of that. Like, you know, if the player is going to be exploring the tight corridors of a freight ship, then you know that they're not going to be like kick boosting all over the place. And so you just like you're going to have opportunities there where you can take advantage of the fact that the player's not in a giant action pack segment. And instead of just like having that be kind of dumbed down combat, because when you're just in a tight corridor with a cultist, it's not that hard to just direct your fire down the hallway and take them out. And so, instead of relying on having like dull combat in every single tight corridor, you just like switch it up with more like a horror set piece instead. And I guess that was kind of like the direction I went with it.
Or like, or use the harvester to terrify me again by having him charge through the hedge maze.
Yeah. That's probably the worst like jump scare in the game, I would say, is the hedge maze. But that's just basically a giant zombies ate my neighbors homage. So I had to do it. I didn't have any option.
So you'd say the horror helped you out with the pacing of the game. It allowed you to have areas where the action would burn off some of the
Yeah.
tension for the horror, and the horror would prevent people from just getting in like a mindless zone from the action.
Yeah, it's like I mean any game, if you just like if you're doing the same thing constantly without any changing up of the formula, then it's going to get monotonous. Like you could have, I mean arguably you could have like the best combat out there, but if that's all that players are doing, then eventually it's going to become kind of mind numbing. So there might be games out there that would prove me wrong on this, and but so yeah, that's kind of the idea is you want to switch things up a little bit, but you have to be careful not to do the thing in games where they're like, oh, we want to switch up the gameplay, time for a turret segment, because it's like not not all changes in gameplay are created equal, and so it's like you don't want to create like a set piece like just for the sake of doing it. It should still feel like it's a natural part of the game, as opposed to like forcing somebody into a turret segment. I don't really like turret segments. I think that kind of suck. But but yeah, I mean it's not only that, but it's also a fun way of like as a developer when you're working on the same game for a long time, if you're able to switch gears and do like Cultic's 80% a like an action shooter, and so most of the time that's what I'm developing, and so it's nice to get a break from doing like action set pieces to be able to do something different, and it kind of keeps like kind of helps keep the burnout away by being able to switch gears and do something a little more fun where you're not just like placing enemies and building combat arenas, but you get to do some more like cinematic stuff or do some like spooky audio design. And so it's not just nice to keep things fresh for the player, but it keeps things fresh for me, the developer, as well. So I'm not like in a nonstop tunnel of action shooter monotony. So it's fun. It's fun for both of us, hopefully.
Question about, because my girlfriend begged me to ask this question. In the shipyard, because we're talking about it, the captain that's glued to the roof, how did he get up there?
So the captain glued to the roof is kind of is kind of just like showing off the fact that the ghosts have this like telekinetic ability. So it's like, that's there you walk into that room and something is immediately wrong because there's somebody like stuck to the ceiling. And then so you either like, you're like, okay, I don't know why they're up there, but there's a key that I need. So you either like jump up and grab it or blow their body up. And then the rest of the environment starts fighting back because, like barrels start floating around. And so it's mainly just there as like it's like the first little splash of like paranormal that the player gets. I mean, obviously like creepy harvester in a cave with a chainsaw. That's certainly not normal, but it's not like ooh spooky like haunted paranormal stuff. And so it's kind of just like it's like the first little nod to the fact that like okay, maybe there's a little more going on here than just like crazy cultists, and just kind of like those little splashes of like something there's something else going on, like there's something else at play here.
Where did you get the inspiration to have stuff like It kind of reminded me of the immersive sim genre where you have, well, you could shoot the captain down. I didn't know that. But also you have stuff like the lanterns that you can throw, the barrels that you can move around, the ghosts make the environment interesting. You can pick
Hmm.
up chairs and throw them. You have an achievement for clogging a toilet with people's organs. What what pushed you to go in that direction for your game?
I think a lot of that was just like playing games like I mean, especially like build engine games, like interactivity with the environments is always was a big part of those. And of course, playing those at a young age, it's you go from like Super Nintendo games to like playing like Doom on PC, and of course Doom was didn't have a lot of interactivity aside from like hitting switches, and then you play like Duke 3D, and it's like, oh, I can pee in this toilet. I can play pool on this pool table. Like I can pay this prostitute, like or this stripper. It's like it's those are the kind of things you want your like 7-year-old kid doing. But it's it's like interactivity is just fun. Like it really helps to like tether the player to the environment and make things feel more immersive. And so just little like splashes of flavor here and there to make the game world feel a little more believable and more like you are a person who is interacting with and is a part of that world as opposed to it just feeling like a game. And like that's a big thing. Anytime I get into one of those chats about like Doom 2016 versus Doom Eternal is like that's one of the big things that hurts my enjoyment of Doom Eternal is just like the difference between getting your first shotgun from a corpse that's on the ground and you like wrestle it from their arms versus like it being a spinning glowing power up, right? It's like
Mm.
it's the difference between like being somebody who is in a game world, like a part of a world and interacting with it versus like you are a character in a game, like you're playing a game. It's a game. And so that's just kind of like the fun interactivity part of it. And then as far as like physics interaction, that's really just like a big like like a big like Dark Messiah thing. It's just like playing that and like Source Engine games, but any of those games that have like a very interactive physics engine, um, I've always thought that was super duper cool. And then even Dusk has that to a really fun degree of just like the simple thing of being able to pick up an object and throw it at an enemy instead of shooting them in the face is really satisfying, and especially if you're like me and you really like to find ways to save it. And so it's like, yes, I will like grab this barrel and carry it halfway across the map to save one shotgun shell. Like I'm absolutely gonna do that.
I what is it that I did? I just loved using the guns too much and making the heads explode, but I did enjoy watching playthroughs where someone just picked up a chair and just yeeted it onto people's heads when they were above people. That always gave me a
Yeah,
chuckle.
yeah. The chair is extremely overpowered.
Speaking of overpowered, how did you come up with the gun design? Not that there's anything overpowered in there, but how did you make sure every weapon felt unique? Where did you get your ideas for the guns?
Design is just like I have a real thing for like the old reliable kind of aesthetic when it comes to guns, like like the like clunky wooden furniture and just like the like blued steel, and it's always something I really enjoyed as far as an aesthetic goes, which is why pretty much every gun in Cultic has wood furniture on it.
Is that why
Um,
you went for the year like 1967 with the whole where the game takes place? That like because all the trucks are old school like that. Is that why you decided to go with that?
Yeah, it was kind of like it was a toss up between doing like more of like a World War II era, but then like some of the guns I wanted to do would have been post World War II. And then if you do things during World War II, you kind of have to like you inevitably start to deal with um like you're kind of limited in scope as to where you can have the game take place in places that like weren't currently affected by an ongoing war, and then you have to make efforts to like distinguish that in your game universe, is World War II actually happening right now? Is this a world where World War II didn't happen? Like, and so it's just like we'll just avoid that. We'll just add like 15 years to the timeline and not worry about it. um but then as far as like designing like weapon rolls, I'm a real I really don't like it when you have a gun in an arsenal that gets obsoleted, especially like I really like starting pistols. And so it really bums me out when a starting pistol is only relevant for like 20 minutes and then you never get to use it again. Um, and so it was like, well, yeah, I want the pistol to be relevant through the whole game. So how are we going to design that? And it's like, well, it needs to be, it needs to do enough damage to stay relevant, even when you have like a shotgun and a lever action. But if you want it to be relevant, it also can't be like it can't be pinpoint accurate because then it's going to, it's going to be more useful than a sniper rifle, but it also can't be like ridiculously inaccurate or, nobody would use it over like a shotgun at close range. And so you just kind of like you look at all of your weapons as like a Venn diagram of like where do they overlap, and like what needs do you have in combat? And of course you always have like close range, long range, medium range. But outside of that, it's like at close range you always want to have like a one-click delete enemy damage dealer, and of course that's almost always going to be your sawed-off shotgun. But then you also, for enemies like that have enough health where the shotgun's not going to kill them in one hit, you want to have like a sustained damage over time dealer, and so that's going to be your Sten, like your bullet hose. If you want to stun lock an enemy or control an entire crowd, you need that extra ammo capacity, and so, I mean, there are challenges there, like the FG42 and the lever action, have probably the most overlap out of any of the weapons because they're both so accurate. And pretty much the only difference is the fact that there's no ADS or zoom on the lever action, which you can still snipe with it. Like it is accurate enough that if you really like hold still and line your shots up, you can snipe with it, but it's so much easier to do it with the FG42 because you actually get the scope on it. And so it's like I can't stop somebody from using the lever action throughout the entire game, but the lever action excels so much at mid-range combat that it kind of keeps that edge over the FG42. And then the FG42's ammo pool is also super limited. So like the FG42, because it particularly excels at like ranged combat, like long range, you want to hold on to it for like when you're dealing with sharpshooters after like map 7. And so like that was probably like the most challenging weapon pair just because there was so much overlap between them. But then like people ask about like, oh, well, why didn't you add like a revolver? Like, I mean, it's like a revolver would be fun, but like, how do you make that distinct from the pistol and the lever action? It's like, it's either, if you make it use the lever action ammo, then, it has to be, it's going to have to be faster than the lever action, which would make it crazy fast because the lever action is already really fast. And if it's also like super accurate, then what's the point of using the lever action? But if it's not super accurate, then what's the point of using it over like the shotgun? And so it's just kind of a balancing act of not wanting any gun to feel like it's useless or gimmicky. I guess gimmicky is the best, like the thing you really like. I really want to avoid. So yeah, there's my rant on weapon arsenal design.
I actually really loved using the lever action close up. It made me feel like a fucking badass to run up and just like rapid fire multiple close range enemies. But I also found it went through the guys that held up the shields damn well.
Yeah.
It went straight through the shield in their skull. Which
Yeah,
reminds me, how did you come up with the enemy design?
Well, so the cultists are obviously copy pasted from Resident Evil 4's Zealots. I mean, to the point that I'm surprised that Capcom hasn't sued me yet. Like I've just always really really liked the design of the Zealots from Resident Evil 4. Just like kind of these like absolute like they can't like they're human, and so like they have human intelligence and they have like human like capability to use weapons and tools, but they also like are completely like brainwashed and unable to be reasoned with, and just like these like depraved killers. And then but then they've also got this like like this cool costume design, like the robes with the like the insignias and the ropes, and I've always thought it was a really cool design, so I just went pretty much straight with that.
Did the inspiration not come from the game Blood?
Not so much, no. I mean the like obviously the idea of having cultists as like the bulk of your enemy roster, like that was a big part of Blood as well. Like they never become irrelevant, and that I would say that part of Blood's cultist design, like the way that they function as a unit in gameplay, where like a single shotgun cultist by themselves, like they're pretty fragile, they're easy to kill, but they deal so much damage that they're always relevant. Like getting surprised by a shotgun cultist at any point in time is never good for you, even whether it's map 1 or map 10. And so like that part of the cultists in Blood, that's there's a lot of influence there, just the way that like the cultists never become they never become obsolete. But as far as like the visual design and kind of the aesthetics of them, it was much more pulled from like Resident Evil 4's Zealots than it was Blood's cultists. But like having the cultists be this thing that you're always, and Resident Evil 4 does it too. Like the Ganados and the Zealots and the soldiers on the island, they're all pretty much the same enemy, just with like different damage values and health values. But that idea of having one kind of fodder enemy type that you fight through the whole game is like the player you let the player get good at the combat that way. Like you're not constantly changing up one-off enemy types that you fight for like one map and then you never see again. So while you do introduce like new enemy types and things that are more dangerous and you know enemies that are maybe spongy or take a different approach to kill. Anytime you walk into a room and there's a bunch of cultists, you're like, oh, okay, no, I know how to handle this. Like, you know how to prioritize that room, and you know, like, what, you know, which enemies are you going to fight first, and what weapons are you going to have to switch to take care of those guys with the shields. But then you can have those elements in there that do mix it up, like when the incinerator shows up. You know, it's like you know how to fight all these cultists already, but now you've got this other guy in the mix who you also have to deal with, and so it's like you get to add like little splashes of flavor and like elements of surprise into the combat, but without getting rid of things that are familiar to the player, like how to deal with cultists. And so like I think like that's a really fun part of any game that kind of retains that core like enemy like I'm trying to think of other examples. I guess even like Doom and Doom 2 do the same thing where you know like you're going to be seeing you know shotgunners and such throughout the entire game and they stay just as dangerous on map 1 as they are you know on the last map. So that's always something I've really enjoyed. Not sure if there's a term for that or not. If there isn't, somebody should make one.
A term for what?
When you like when you have an enemy like a pool of enemy designs that don't get like discarded after like the second map, you know, like you can
Oh,
use
okay.
like an enemy is an enemy has enough flexibility that you can use them throughout the entire game and they never become like ridiculously easy or ridiculously hard in any scenario.
That's fair. Or my least favorite is where they just go, "Oh, it's harder, but recolored."
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So, I don't want to jump back to. Well, actually, I do kind of want to jump back into it. Level design. How'd you come up with all the secrets? There seems to be quite a few on every level.
Um, yeah, so like I mentioned before, I'm really not very good at planning, so I can't sit here and say that I like planned all these secrets out and I have this big note, you know, this notebook of like map designs where I had every single secret laid out beforehand, because that definitely didn't happen. But it's more so just like as you're designing the map, you start to see opportunities, just like seeing opportunities for horror set pieces. You see opportunities for secrets where it's like you design a stairwell and you're like, well, you know, like you know, is there any way I could hide something under that stairwell? Like, how would you make that like hard to find and not like painfully obvious? Or, you know, if you have a hallway of doors, you're like maybe one of these doors is locked and like how could you know how would the player get to the other side? And you know, how is there an event they could use or and that's kind of the benefit of when you're doing like real world spaces like Cultic has, you know, when you're doing like if you're designing an environment that's like you know like well this is an asylum or this is a you know this is like a prison building, you can kind of look at like what kind of hiding places would be in a building like that versus you know like Quake map design that's more abstract or more like you know like it's more like impossible architecture and geometry of places that don't actually exist. So it's hard because you know in that case it's like if you're going to have a secret, it's just like well I'm going to put a hole in the wall here and that's going to be where the secret is, or like you know you have to wall hump around this room to find this one like secret sliding part of the wall. And since Cultic's based on real world spaces, like that's not a thing. Like I don't, as far as I'm aware, you know most buildings don't have secret wall segments that slide into the floor when you touch them the right way. And so you get to design around more practical things like putting secrets in vents or like maybe behind a door that's blocked off and you have to find a way to unblock it. And so it's mostly just looking for opportunities of places to hide things that are also places that people might think to look. You know, like if you're if you walk out of a door and you see that the path goes left and right, and if you know that it clearly wants you to go one direction, but in the other direction there's like you know there's like trees and some you know maybe there's a truck there. It's like well maybe I can you get in the truck? Can you get behind the truck? Like is there anything under it? Like is there anything in those trees? And so you kind of like you look for opportunities for the player to explore and reward them for it, as opposed to just having like a ton of empty spaces that never have anything in them. But yeah, so once again, it's basically just flying by the seat of my pants and hoping it works out.
What about how did you come up with some of the more tertiary elements of the game? How did you come up with stuff like the health pack and the weapon upgrade system?
So the health kit's kind of it's very much like a Mega Man X E-Take kind of situation. I've always really liked in games like that where you have and like kind of to the same degree like energy tanks in Super Metroid, where it's like you have ways to expand your healing capabilities, and you're also rewarded for staying at full health. So like in with Super Metroid and reserve tanks or Mega Man X and E tanks, if you're at full health and you continue to collect pickups, you get to store them for later use, which is like it's so nice to not feel like you're wasting those pickups. Like it's just a really nice thing to be like rewarded for being good at the game, right? And it's like a big difference between like Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 6 in terms of like in Resident Evil 4, enemies will continue to drop ammo even if you have a ton of ammo. Whereas like in Resident Evil 6, they just stop. Like if you have a good amount of ammo on you, enemies will just stop dropping it, which is annoying because then it's like no matter how good you are at the game, you'll never get to have a surplus of these resources because the game is coded to create like an artificial scarcity. And so just being able to still be rewarded for being good at the game is nice. And so that was like a big thing that fueled that, like, oh, like you have this health kit, and if if you use it up, you aren't punished for that by now you have an empty field kit that you can't use till you find another one. But it's like if if you play smart and stay at full health, then you can refill it over time. And so it's just like little things like that. I mentioned earlier, like the little things that are in the player's favor. And that would be an example of that. Like this is just another thing that is working in the player's favor. And so yeah, that's kind of where the old health kit. Did you have another example besides the health kit that I forgot about already?
Ah, weapon parts.
Oh yeah, that's straight up. That's just Resident Evil 4's weapon upgrade system. I love it. And it's not. I mean, Resident Evil 4 is not the only game. Obviously, like Dead Space is another good example. But like a fairly linear upgrade system where you can just like you could take guns that you'd like and make them better, as opposed to like always having to switch out to a different weapon for a particular situation. Um, like if you couldn't upgrade like the handguns in Resident Evil 4, then they would become obsolete pretty quickly because like as soon as you get something that does way more damage, you're just going to want to use that all the time. But like that sucks if you really like using the handguns because there's just no option for it. So like not forcing the player to switch to, like the Sten every time there's a big crowd because maybe they prefer the pistol for its ammo economy, and so having a way to expand the pistol's functionality without making it like well. I guess the pistol does get a little overpowered, but without making it like extremely overpowered or like changing its primary function, you can increase its capacity, you can add a burst fire to it, and so it starts to kind of fill more of the gap that it has in functionality, where like maybe you would normally switch to the Sten for its bigger ammo capacity. You don't necessarily have to do that as often because now you can upgrade the pistol to better fill a role that it doesn't normally fill, and that's just that's just part of that old reliable weapon aesthetic that I really like. Is just like I like the pistol. I'm gonna make the pistol as good as it can possibly be, and I'm gonna hang out with it forever, and we're gonna be best friends.
Yeah, you kind of just summed up me. I like the pistol because it didn't consume as much ammo, and also you don't see enough broom handle pistols in video games.
Yeah, well, they're really expensive. So I think like realistically, I don't think you'd ever have that high of a concentration of them in one place, unless of course it's like like World War I, World War II era, and you're in Europe.
I also don't believe they were that reliable, and the people who used them primarily weren't the good guys.
Yeah, I haven't. There's no like in-game lore as to why there's so many C96s in North America during the events of Cultic. I just like to imagine it's an alternate universe where like the guy who was going to invent the 1911 got like ran over by a bus, and and so the C96 just became like the handgun that everybody used instead.
I am slightly worried now that there's going to be a gun nut in the comments that's like, actually, and I'm going to be just look like an idiot.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, like that's like that that's always going to happen. And I'm not like I'm very much like an aesthetics gun enthusiast. Like, oh, that gun looks cool. I want to own one. And as versus like that's why all the guns that I own are like novelty 22s because I'm like that's ridiculous. I want it. As opposed to being like oh, this was the best gun ever invented. I have to have it. And it's just like nah, it looks goofy. And so I in no way pretend to be a gun expert. But it's just fun to be able to have cool looking guns in your game.
You and me both. The things I want to buy because I don't have one because I'm poor. My list on for my guns. It's did I play that in a game and did I like it? That's on the list. But I also want. That's also why I want a black powdered musket because they look cool.
Oh man, yeah.
But you're
You
never
could
defending your house with that bitch because you missed a round and that's it. You're over.
you get one chance to defend your house with that.
The fear it increases the accuracy.
Exactly. Yep.
Another question I want to talk about. The thing that convinced me that I needed to play your game was my roommate came home and he's like, I found a trailer. The only way I can describe this game is it's crunchy. And when I looked up the trailer, that's kind of how I'm going to sum up the sound design, is that it's very crunchy. It's satisfying. It's great. How did you come to that? To crushing the sound bites and making it the way it is?
So I have always been really like I've always been a big fan of the like bit crushed aesthetic of like build engine audio, like specifically Duke Nukem 3D. I think that's like very specifically the sound that I like. And it's I'm not like super well versed on the specifics of it. So next to the gun nut, there might also be like an audio file in the comments who's gonna tear me apart here. But to me personally, I like the aesthetic of bit crushing over the aesthetic of just lowering the sampling rate of something. Like it's like a way to save on like storage, like the actual like size of the file without just like muffling it to all hell. And so I've always really liked that aesthetic. And some of that also comes from like the early days of using Flash. Like when I started using Flash back when it was like Flash 5, there was, like, or no, I guess it would have been Flash, ooh, like MX. Anyway, there was there was an old version of Flash that came with like this sample library, and they had like all the sounds were like super duper like bit crushed. And I remember like hearing those sound effects in like all kinds of Flash movies online. And so it's just like this other part of like my childhood is watching Flash videos that have like these super bit crushy sound effects in them. And so it's just like always an aesthetic that I really liked. But of course, the problem with bit crushing is, like any other form of compression, it does harm like the quality of the sample, especially like if your audio sample has a lot of like low or really high end frequencies. Like bit crushing just mangles them. And so if you just like blanket bit crush all of the audio in your game, then you're going to lose out on quality on stuff like that, like the metallic sounds of like reloading a gun are just going to get lost completely, or like the really low rumbles of explosions is just going to be completely mangled by bit crushing. And so Cultic's sound design is more of like a selective bit crushing and like a selective use of like low and high fidelity samples where you use enough of like the bit crushed low quality audio that you can establish an aesthetic, but you're still using enough high quality samples that everything is still like crisp and readable, like recognizable. And so like the music does the same thing where it's like 60 to 70% of each song is like a custom sound font that I made that's all like bit crushed instruments. But then you've got like that one or two high quality, like full orchestral sample instrument running on top of it. Like in the first map, you've got like the piano that runs over everything. And that way it doesn't just sound like you took an MP3 and compressed the crap out of it. Like you can tell that it's something that was engineered versus like something that's a limitation of the hardware. And that's the thing is like in a game like Duke 3D, obviously the aesthetic that came from the audio was a limitation. It's just the way that they were able to save on storage space with those samples. And so like if they had modern like modern equipment and modern like recordings, and it would have sounded just like any other game with like crispy, clean, full quality audio samples. And so like you're kind of trying to like replicate an aesthetic without also bringing about all of like the garbage that came with it, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think I'm really happy that you did that because I wouldn't even realize. But yeah, the head explosions crunched, but then the metallic of like some of the enemies walking is, I wouldn't say as crunched, but I wouldn't want to miss out on that sound because that was one of my favorite things is rounding a corner, hearing the clanking turnaround, switching to the shotgun and blowing their heads off.
Yeah, and like like especially stuff like the ambient audio of like the wind in the trees and the rustling of leaves that doesn't sound nice when it's a bit crushed. It's terrible. And so it's like and so you have to deviate you deviate a little bit from the aesthetic, but you I give up. I'm done. No more questions.
Okay, there we go. We're back to normal. Uh,
Yes, Cultic guy has a 3D model. That's all I'm gonna say.
I feel so bad that some of you, I'm having to cut you short sometimes because of the audio.
I'm tired of the internet connection squashing my passion.
It's okay. We've only got about 30 minutes left if you can manage. Uh,
I can try.
last question, and then we'll get to like just talking about games we're playing. Um, how'd you come up with switching between like a primary and a secondary with F? Because well, it's not. It's not a primary and secondary, but you sort of created equipping one with then the benefit of being able to switch away in the weapon rail, and I thought that was really clever.
You mean just like the quick swap where you can switch
Yeah.
between your pre? Oh, I mean like that's a pretty common bind in most games. I don't I didn't definitely didn't come up with that
Oh,
idea.
really?
And then
Damn,
the
I need
key,
to play more games.
yeah, pretty much any game like I mean like the new Doom games that require you to kind of flip through your arsenal almost always have that like quick swap button. But the difference being that because those games are generally designed for like gamepad parity, um, at least I was just playing Doom Eternal, so I'm pretty sure this is correct, and somebody might yell at me if I'm wrong. But it's like you tap the weapon wheel button to quick swap and you hold down the weapon wheel button to open the wheel. And I don't like that at all because it means that like you don't get the instant feedback of opening the weapon wheel, which with Cultic's weapon wheel where you can like flick the mouse in one direction to select a weapon, that's like it has to be there. It's like imperative. Um, and so that's the reason that's kind of on its own key. It's on F because I was running out of keys, and people use their own crazy key binds anyway. So I was like, whatever. I'll just put it on a key that's available, and it's easy for the left hand to hit, and people can change it if they want.
So far, people to complain, we got gun nuts, audiophiles, and Doom aficionados. That's who's on the hit list.
Keyboard layout snobs.
And now keyboard layout snobs. And final question. What do you have planned going for the future of Cultic with Part 2?
Um, so so like the future of Cultic in general, obviously custom difficulty is coming soon, hopefully soon, as soon as I get it polished up, and then like I'm got some localization stuff I want to do to try to make the game more accessible to other languages. But then hopefully beginning of next year, I'm hoping to get started on chapter two. And I don't really have a lot of specifics to share as far as like what's, what you might expect to see in there. But I think like I've learned a lot of lessons from level design from the first chapter, and I have a bunch of feedback of, like what levels people liked and what didn't they like. And I'm really gonna be able to tap into a lot of that to guide the design of chapter two as it goes forward. But I would expect some much more detailed maps because I'd really like to kind of could dive into doing a little more set dressing and relying a little bit less on trees and rocks to kind of like mask how empty the maps are and dig more into like prop design and make some more detailed environments now that I'm not um, because I'll be able to focus more on map design. Like since the enemies and all of the core systems are done, I don't have to stop every 5 seconds to go like fix this or fix that or implement this or implement that. And I'll hopefully be able to focus much more on just like making the maps. So I'm hoping to be able to put a little more time and effort into that. But yeah, nothing super specific to share just yet. Hopefully, maybe beginning of the year, I'll have some more stuff to tease. But right now, I don't really want to get ahead of myself.
That reminds me, where is Cultic taking place, and why did you pick the world's like one of these super small towns to set it in?
So it takes place in like the Pacific Northwest, kind of like in the like Oregon, Washington area. But like those like specific location isn't really important, but um, mainly, like doing a rural area like that is mainly just like a limitation of my resources at the time. I didn't really have the level design experience to do like a big bustling city or things that would require like a ton of detail and a ton of like like specific attention to like like environment design and stuff like that. So it was just like working within my scope as a game developer, doing like outdoor areas where you can kind of brush things in with like nature and trees and grass and kind of make the world feel a little more full that way, is a little bit easier than having to like texture, like every single building and sign and make a bunch of different cars that are everywhere and worry about, are there going to be people here? Like, do I have to model those people and animate them? And so the rule setting is kind of just like a way to ease into the level design a little bit. But I feel a little more comfortable now, so I'm hoping to not have to stick to quite so many like rural abandoned settings for chapter two. So
I
you can make of that what you will.
I couldn't tell where we were. I live in Florida. I don't know what a mountain is.
That's
Uh,
fair. Me neither. I live in Kansas, so
oh, is it just as flat?
it's all flat here. Yeah, it's very
Okay.
flat. We don't have hurricanes, but we have tornadoes, so it's almost the same place.
Well, the hurricanes spawn tornadoes, so we get the best of both worlds.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I had one almost touch my backyard when Irma hit. That was a fun time. I've since sworn off living in Florida for the rest of my life because my shutters came off, and goddamn, I hated that.
Ooh. Yeah. Yeah, this summer, this year was the first time I've ever had a tornado come close enough to the house that I was like, yeah, we should probably go to the basement. Normally, it's you just do the classic Midwestern pastime of watching the tornado. But when your trees are bent over touching the ground, it's like, oh nope, nope, let's go downstairs. It's time to go to the basement.
Is there any risk of Cultic 2 files being thrown into a tornado?
No, I Cultic also marks the first time that I properly invest in version control and backups. So Cultic is normally quite safe from local file destruction.
That reminds me, I need to do that on my own projects. And we are now on the part of the podcast where I think we just talk about what we're playing. So, Jason, what have you been playing?
So ironically, the timing is a little ironic given like all the stuff that's going on with like Mick Gordon and all that. But I'm trying Doom Eternal again. I paid full price for it when it launched. I haven't been able to enjoy it all the way through, and I'm gonna beat the damn thing. So I'm playing it on easy this time, not on the heels of playing Doom 2016. I'm not like going and expecting it to play like Doom 2016 because I've heard that's a big no-no. And I read somewhere that the chainsaw always recharges 1 pip of fuel, which I didn't know, and that's like changed everything for me. So I'm optimistic that I'm going to enjoy it this time. Really hopeful for that. And then I just started a new 7 Days to Die server as well.
And Days to Die good. It always looked a little clunky for my tastes.
It's good now. It was
No.
it is still clunky. It's still a little janky, but 7 Days to Die it offers like as unique of an experience as Minecraft does, like nowadays. Like just
Oh,
like
wow, okay.
like the sheer size of the random world like the it does. There's like God over like 200 unique points of interest that can generate, and the points of interest are like each of them is designed as like a little mini like dungeon, like every little build has like a designed path that you're supposed to take through it that has like it'll have like like trapped floorboards or zombies hiding in closets, and that's all randomized, and each POI has like a loot room that you're trying to get to, and you can like accept random quests that will take you to those POIs, and you can generate these gigantic like 8 square kilometer maps, and of course since it's voxel based, like you can destroy buildings and the buildings have structural integrity, so like if zombies start like busting out the supports of your building, it can crumble, and so it's really fun. When I first bought it back when it came out, I was not interested in it whatsoever. I thought it was terrible. But since 2017 2018, it's been pretty good, and nowadays, especially with like the total conversions that are out there for it's a really good time. I still think it suffers pretty badly from not having much like end game content. Like once you get to the point where like your character level is maxed out and you've got like the best equipment and gear that you can find, pretty much all that's left is just like making a giant base and seeing how well it holds up against hordes of zombies. But like I get pretty bored of that, so I wish it had more of an end game, but it takes a good like 2 weeks of playing it with friends like constantly to get to the end game. So Just like cranking up the difficulty and doing whatever you can to kind of slow down progression makes it a little more rewarding. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I
I really
feel
enjoy it.
I felt the same way with Project Zomboid. I mean, I love that game, but when you get the end game where you start building the base, and I'm like, I don't really care to put up walls. I'd rather just
Yeah.
try to survive, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's like the same with like Ark. When I play Ark, like I enjoy the early game when you're kind of like scrambling to get by and you're kind of like, just like you feel like you're actually playing a survival game. And then you get to the point where like when survival is no longer an aspect of the survival game because you have so many resources, then there has to be something else there, right? And if that part's not there, then I don't know, what do you do? And so that's kind of how I feel about 7 Days to Die. It's like once you've got like a top level auto shotgun with like 600 shotgun shells and the best armor you can get in the game, it's like, okay, well now what? Like I can just kind of steamroll everything that comes my way.
Yeah, that's where thankfully I play a lot of stuff like Fallout and
Hmm.
Outer Worlds, and at least there's like quests and story to do because it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I've blown apart 700 heads, but this time the guy's a bad guy. Or like, I don't know,
Yeah.
there's a different reason why I'm killing this poor
Yeah,
bad
yeah,
guy.
yeah. Yeah, and like I don't think that like 7 Days to Die could what is pitched as like a good end game for it is like 7 Days to Die has traders like merchants that are spread out throughout. And those are you go to those merchants and you get quests from them, and as you do more quests for them, you like their shop gets like a bigger inventory, and you can unlock harder quests, and then you get to like the top tier, like the tier 5 quests that they take you like gigantic like hospitals and skyscrapers, and it can take like an hour to clear the building out, like to do it fully. And those are really fun. And once you get past those, it's like there's nothing to do at that point. So it's like, I've always thought it would be neat if like for an absolutely absurd amount of money, each trader sells like a part that you need to like repair like an airplane that spawns at one specific POI. And so like you at least have something to work towards and you can put it off as long as you want. But like it doesn't have to be like this giant grand like how the forest, that when they added the end game for the forest, it was like this really cool but like really long elaborate like story segment that you have to do, which completely like ditches the survival gameplay that you've been doing up to that point. Like it doesn't have to be that. It's just like give me a way to beat the game that's not just turning my server off and saying that I'm done. You know?
That's sort of the struggle between like the more sandbox survival and the because some people will just complain that there isn't a goal.
Uh-huh.
Because people, I mean, I've met people who are like, I don't like Minecraft because there's no goals.
Hmm.
But then there's stuff like Subnautica. I haven't played it, but I watched the whole playthrough of it. Same with The Forest. I love the story in those games.
Hmm.
I think that's really cool to play a survival game and be like, okay, I actually know where I'm going. Because I think everyone's reached a point where you kind of have something to do in Minecraft and you're like, I don't really
Yeah.
care anymore. Time to delete this and start all over again.
Yeah, but at least Minecraft does have like, I mean, you've got, if you go and like kill the end dragon and you go and like kill a wither, and it's like those are two things that you could set for yourself as like as a goal. And I guess you could do the same thing in 7 Days to Die, where you're like, once I get 1 million tokens from the merchant, I'm gonna say I'm done. But it would be cooler if there were like, like on day 100, there's like a unique gigantic like zombie horde with a special boss zombie that spawns, and you could at least have that as like your, if we beat this, then we're done. But like it doesn't really have that because the game just like you max out the quest lines for each of the traders, and there's not very many tier 5 points of interest, so those get really repetitive really fast. And it's just you kind of have like people who really enjoy building a giant base and using it to go through the Horde Nights, they'll probably find more value out of the game. But for me, that's a weaker part of the experience because I don't think the Horde Nights are balanced very well. So that's like my least favorite part of the game. I
The
like the
hell is a
questing much,
Horde
much
Knight?
more. So 7 Days to Die's namesake is that every 7 in-game days there's a blood moon. And during the blood moon, you just get like constant zombie spawns at nighttime that attack your base. And so the gameplay loop is kind of like you spend 1 week like looting and crafting and like and preparing for the Horde Night. And then Horde Night happens and it's like 20 minutes of like defending your base against like nonstop waves of zombies. And of course the zombies can destroy your base, so you've got to be really careful to not let them like wreck your walls and get inside your base. And then that's over, and you get a whole bunch of loot from those zombies, and you've usually leveled up a few times from it. And then you go, and then you go and do more quests, and you go upgrade stuff even more. But like the Horde Knights, just like I don't know, I think they drag on too long for me personally. So they're always feel like a slog. They're fun, but they're just like it's too much. Like it's after 10 minutes of unloading my gun at waves of zombies coming at the base, it's like, all right, I want to get back to the questing again because the questing is what's more fun to me personally.
Oh, I get that. It feels kind of like Terraria's events, like the Blood Moon and stuff, where I'm like, this is neat, but like,
Oh
I
my
feel
God,
like
it won't
mining.
stop. Yeah, yeah. I would say it's very similar, except in Terraria, when there's a blood moon, you can just go underground and ignore it. And in 7 Days to Die, you can't do that because the zombies will just like find you wherever you are. Um, and that's not to say like you can kind of opt out of the blood moons. Like you could go like find a really tall like apartment complex and just stand on the roof, and none of the zombies will be able to get to you. Eventually, they would destroy enough of the apartment complex that it would collapse, but
Oh,
that would
nice.
take yeah, that part's always really cool. But yeah, it's super duper fun. I definitely recommend it, especially if you have like co-op friends to play. Yeah, like it's strong enough as a single player game, but it's real. I really enjoy it in co-op. It's just because like there's a lot of tasks that you like have to that are faster done if you can delegate them out. Like if you're having to spend your skill points to do everything in the game, like to do gun crafting and vehicle crafting and science and farming and hunting, then it's going to take you forever to progress. But if you have like somebody who's specializing in vehicles and robotics, so you don't have to worry about spending points on that tree, and you have somebody who's specializing in hunting and gathering meat for the party, like that to me, that's like where it really shines, and it's a lot of fun. And then like once everybody's once everybody's kind of completed their duties, then you can all get together and go run quests because you can like share quests with each other and do them together, and that part's a lot of fun.
You might have convinced me to look at the game because it sounds like something me and my friends will be able to play. I haven't been able to do a lot of online stuff, dude, because I got to do this podcast, I got to do my game development stuff, and college, which is oh boy. But I have been finding myself play a lot of single player games.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm in the opposite boat now where it's like when I was younger, like in like middle school, high school, and I guess when I was in college, I was like I played almost exclusively like single player stuff. Like especially sandbox games, which of course were huge in like the late 2000s and early 2010s. That was like just getting a big ass sandbox game and just like diving into it for like the entire weekend was my jam. And I just like I can't do it anymore. I'm much more into like games where I can hop on with my friends and we can kind of chat about how our week's been going and play for an hour or two and then hop back out. And all I seem to have time for anymore. And so I really want to get back into single player games, but they just like overwhelm me now, which really sucks. Like trying to play like Cyberpunk or Red Dead Redemption 2 or anything, it's just like this sheer content like overwhelms me because it's like I know I'm never going to be able to do it all, and so it's just like it's really discouraging. It's just like I can't these side quests, and it sucks, and makes me super anxious for no good reason. It's stupid. I hate it.
I thankfully do not have that problem because I play a lot of MMOs from time to
Uh-huh.
time, and if I had that, I'd take one look at RuneScape and be like, "All right, I'm out of
Yeah.
here. This,
Yeah. Yeah.
booted up 36 skills. Okay, I'm out of here. Goodbye."
Yeah, like I played Cyber and they played it pretty far after it launched, so it was already had quite a few times. And like I was really into it during the prologue. And I don't know, have you played Cyberpunk at all?
No, I watched half of the anime. That was pretty cool.
I need to watch that. But so like Cyberpunk's prologue is like kind of a fake open world at that point. Like you're not like locked into a super linear mission, but much of the open world, at least as far as I could tell, is kind of closed off,
I
and
kind of
you're getting very
fucking hate those. Like they did that to me in Mad Max, and I'm like, make it end, make it fucking
yeah.
end.
Yeah, so I actually really liked it in this case because, like I said, for me, like the sheer open world thing gets overwhelming to me. So I was kind of enjoying the more like guided opening experience. And I thought it was really strong. I had a lot of fun with it. And then as soon as I completed the prologue, it's like, here's 400 side missions. Here's you can do gambling, you can do street racing, you can do this, you can do that. And I was like, oh God, it's too much. I don't want no. And then that was it. I just like put the game down and didn't come back to it.
See,
And it's dumb. Like I don't think that games having optional content is a bad thing at all. It's just like I can't explain why, but it's like it's just like disheartening. It's like I know it's like because I know that I won't have time to experience everything the game has to offer. It's just like why bother? And
It's like
it's like it
FOMO,
sucks.
right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like I'm never going to be able to do all of this. So like I just don't even want to try it. It's
See,
it's so dumb.
I get that, but not for like too much content. I get that when I have to make a ton of decisions at once. So like my friend tried getting me into Warhammer, the tabletop game, and there's
Uh-huh.
so many first off, because you have to buy each individual army for the tabletop. When you make your decision, if you don't have a lot of money, that's the decision you're making. So you got to decide
Oh,
on your army.
you mean like physical tabletop?
Yeah, but
Oh,
I
okay.
have to individually build each unit, and depending on what gun I equipped and what model piece I add, that's their model piece in the game. So there's like the not classes, but there's like the types, and then I gotta decide like, do I want to give this guy like this weird add-on, or like, do I want to give him this type of rifle? I can make one drone, but do I want to make it a marker light drone or a machine drone? And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
no, I don't want to do this. And I have an unbuilt army of Tau in the closet for like a year and a half that I've not touched because there's too many decisions to make. I'm like, I can't.
Yeah.
Too many numbers. I feel like I'm in trig.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't do tabletop with like I really enjoy like the social aspect of like D&D or Pathfinder or whatever, but what I don't like is the super like if I'm playing with the DM who's like super rigid, and especially the ones who are like out to kill their players, like no, that's ridiculous. I hate that. So it took me forever to like the only time I've actually enjoyed playing it really was with one of my best friends was the DM because he's just super lax and he's like his goal is for everyone to have fun. And so I'm not like an aficionado. I frequently forget what spells I have and what they do because I'm a dunce and I can't keep all that information straight. And so having somebody who's just like they're like I kind of want to try this. Do you think I could do that? And they're like, well, sure. Like we'll roll for it and we'll see what happens. Like, oh, okay, great. Like I can do that. But if it's like one of those things where like I don't exactly know what this spell does, and I try to ask the DM, and he's like, "I don't know. I guess you'll have to roll and try it." It's like, well, no, motherfucker, I don't want to kill. I don't want to kill my character. Like just like that's it. Yeah, it's rough. So
I
I don't play D&D very often for that reason.
I love when my players like try doing dumb shit. Like one of my best friends. There was like this sleeping giant beneath the sand, but all they heard was rumbling. So he's like, okay, I'm gonna use this spell and superheat the sand beneath me into glass, and then I'm gonna use this other spell and break the glass. And because the spell I cast it's 5 feet deep, I'm gonna cast it like 5 times. Do I reach what's at the bottom? And I'm like, what the? How did you? Yeah, sure, you reached the fucking bottom.
Yeah,
But like stuff like that is hilarious to me because it's like that's
yeah.
what you want. You want to see your players come up with like creative solutions to your puzzles.
Yeah, and like, and I guess granted, like I've played with two different DMs as an adult, and it was fun. Both of those were really fun. But it was like in high school. It was like every time because I had friends that were really into it in high school, and several times they tried to get me into it, but we would always play where like somebody's like older brother was being the DM, and they were very much like either A being a complete snooty shit about everything, where it was like if you oh you don't know what that armor does, like no idiot, I've never played this before, or they were just out to like kill their players, like it was them versus the players for the entire thing, and it was like you could get in and you could have your you spend like hours building your character and then they die in the first like 5 minutes because like oh nope you stepped in the wrong spot and your guy broke his ankle and fell off a tower and died and it's like oh okay well
I,
thanks I guess I'll go home now. Like that was fun.
I always feel bad because like sometimes I'll come up with like traps and I'm like I can't wait for my players to fall into them, and then the minute they do I'm like oh actually here's some abilities you could do. Like I always feel bad killing my players, but sometimes they just do dumb things. I'm like, yeah, no, you weren't gonna jump that chasm. That chasm was 40 feet deep. I don't know what to tell you, dude. It's fucking
Yeah,
dead.
yeah. We were doing like a mega dungeon kind of thing. It was like a campaign based around just like this gigantic multi-level dungeon, and on one level we had like there was like a dragon with like a treasure hoard, and we had the option of like fighting this dragon and taking everything, or like he was trying to like tell us if we left him in his hoard alone he would grant each of us a gift. And so since I'm a play in that as a paladin. I was like, ah, no, we can't hurt this innocent creature. And so we took the gifts, and it was like a random roll for the gifts. Like we would roll a D100 and then like something else, and try to, and it would we would just pick from like a list based on what we rolled. And two of us wound up like I wound up with like some kind of like ring of water walking, or a cloak, something that gave me water walking. And then one of our other characters got something that let them like walk on walls, or like climb, like climb on the walls for like a limited amount of time. And we wound up like the next floor after that dungeon floor was like a swampy, like quicksandy type floor, and every single trap on that floor revolved around being underwater. And so it was like we just got to like waltz through the entire floor, because the DM would be like, aha, you step in that spot, but it's quicksand. It's like, well, I have water walking. He's like, oh, damn it. It's like all these traps involve like things that are underwater. And so if you're walking on top of the water, then you just don't trigger them. And it was just like a complete stroke of luck that we just like the one guy was walking on the walls and I was walking on water. And since like our other player was like a 4 foot tall, like little female, I don't remember the race she was playing as. Anyway, she just like climbed on my back. I was like, yeah, I'll just carry her. It's fine. I have the carry weight for it. It's just like stuff like that's really fun. But some DMs would be like, oh, your cloak of water walking broke. Can't use it now. Jump in my trap.
That just sounds like a bad DM. Like, I couldn't imagine doing that to my players, being like,
I agree.
It's you're.
That was like my entire experience. Every time someone tried to get me to play in like middle school and high school, it was that every single time. It was just like someone being like a big old douchebag DM. And so I spent the longest time like, no, I don't like D&D. It's fucking stupid. until you play with somebody who's a good DM, and you're like, oh, now I understand.
I stopped playing for so long, not because I had a bad DM, because I was the forever DM. I had bad players. Because I had people that would just murder hobo throughout the campaign. It's like, I don't want to play with you. This fucking sucks, dude. You're an asshole.
Yeah, I like one of the first campaigns I played in, there was a player we had who was like, he was that like, I'm a like a half demon dragonborn, and he's just like murder hoboing everything. Like you go to the tavern, he's like, I kill the bartender. And so while we're playing this, like, he's I don't remember the exact race or anything, but he was like a half demon, like half undead thing. And my character is like a paladin, like a holy, like, like what's it called? Not the covenant, but maybe is it covenant? I don't remember. Anyway, like you're like sworn to protect the innocent and like uphold, like your values and virtues and whatnot. And you've got this murder hobo on your team, and of course being like all of like the buffs that my character has, like the things that he's strong against, are like dark and evil and undead. And so every time the murder hobo guy is like oh, I'm gonna kill the barkeep, I'm just like, don't do it, I'm gonna have to kill you if you do that, right? And then you're gonna have to make a new character.
My favorite murder hobo moment was an ex-friend of ours. He was just kind of a douchebag in general, but he also made a character that was a douchebag to my character. Like, he tried escaping by locking me in a room. He was rude. He basically roleplayed himself. But
nice.
For a long story short, he died, came back, and if he got too far away from the player who summoned him back, that's how he brought his character back, he would dissolve. And he tried finding a loophole. The DM was too smart for him, and he melted. Anyway, we got his ashes in a jar, and the DM's explaining how I can bring him back, and I just look him in the eyes, and I'm like, I smash the jar and walk away. And it was the end of the campaign too, so he just spent the next 20 minutes like slouched down, arms folded, sulking in the corner. And I was like, I have no reason to roleplay to want you. You're an asshole.
Yeah, that same campaign that we had like that half demon whatever guy who was murder hoboing everything. We had like in the dungeon we were in, we came into this room that was full of like giant rats, or like like big rats. But like the way that the DM described it was that like the rats look like, they look like they'll attack you if you walk into the room, but they aren't like actively engaging with you. And so like part of my like my character's covenant is like like I don't attack innocent creatures And so I was like, no, like let's leave them alone. And then like basically we did like perception and stuff to figure out that these creatures are basically starving. Like they're, you know, like they're not hostile, but they are like starving. So if we go in the room, they'll probably attack us. Um, and so, of course, Murder Hobo guy was like, he's like, I walk into the room and I stomp on one of their heads, and I'm just like, brother, no, stop. And so all of the rats started attacking him, it was basically one of those things where there's like one creature, I don't know if there's a term for it, but it's when like the DM operates a group of enemies as if they were one enemy, so you're not rolling for like each and every one.
Oh yeah, I get you.
And so I was like, okay, so these, if they all operate on one unit, can I use, I think a command, my paladin hammer, you can issue like a one-word command and you basically roll to see if it succeeds or not. It's like a precision charisma thing. And so I tried to issue a command for them to stop. And I succeeded. And it's like, and with that ability, I think this was D&D 5e, if any of this is sounding familiar at all to you.
Yeah, probably.
It was like with that ability, I get to choose like when to suspend it, and so I was going to stop them so that somebody could go in and help him out. But then like after my turn of stopping the creatures, he's like, well, the creatures are stunned. I grabbed two of them and like smashed them together. And then on my next turn, I was like, whatever. I release the hold that I have on the creature, and I shut the door and locked it. And so then he's just like stuck in this room with like 30 rats that are all attacking him at once. And it's just like, why? Just like, why do you got to be like that?
Did you kill him?
So he got incapacitated, but managed to kill most of them because they were all densely packed, and he had some big like fire like area of effect thing, and managed to kill most of them, but like took enough damage that he was incapacitated, and somebody went in there and saved him. But I think he like quit the campaign like maybe a week or so after that, which was great. I was very happy about that. But yeah. So yeah, I've been there, done that. It's not fun.
No, I don't really understand the point of it. It's like if you were trying to do co-op Skyrim and he just murdered every NPC in sight. It's like, what are you getting out of this? What is the point of of any of this?
Yeah, I have not tried I have not tried the Skyrim Together mod yet. I don't know if it's any good.
Last I heard, the devs were complaining about like something, and then they quit and abandoned the mod. But that happened, I think, while I was in high school. So the Skyrim Together fans are going to be in the comments complaining as well. If my information's out of date.
Yeah, it looked really cool, but it was one of those things that like you check on it like every other day for a year, and there's never any progress. Like, okay, this probably isn't going anywhere, and then I just completely forgot about it. So I don't know if I don't know if it exists at all anymore. I'll have to look that up.
It might. I don't know. It's always a shame when you see like fan projects just like fade into the aether.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh.
Yeah, and I get it because like adding co-op to Skyrim is a huge undertaking, and so like if it winds up being too hard or too time consuming, but what really sucks is when it's going really strong and then there's some like absolute like grade school tier drama that happens, and then the whole project just gets called off, and it's like, okay, great.
It's sad until someone sums it up and then posts it to our hobby drama, and I get to read it. Then I love it.
Yeah. God, yeah, that stuff's always really frustrating.
What I feel bad for is usually when it's like, yeah, our lead developer died in a car accident. I'm like, okay, that's just fucking depressing. Okay.
Yeah, didn't that happen with like the GoldenEye Source port, like Source Engine? There was like a Source Engine port of GoldenEye, and it was like super duper promising, and then the lead developer died, and it's just like, oh God, like it's super disappointing because obviously the project is going to be abandoned now, but it's like what do you even do? Like there's nobody else who knows the material enough to take it over.
I don't.
That's
one of the saddest Do you watch game documentaries at all?
I don't avoid them. I just don't think I don't think I've ever watched one though. No.
If you want one, they made one. There's a channel called No Clip. They do game documentaries, fantastic work, and they interviewed the team who made Astroneer. But like the highlight of the not the highlight's wrong choice of words, but like I guess the emotional crux of the documentaries. There's a point where one of the devs passes away tragically, and it's just it's heartbreaking to know that it's like The real problem was that the team felt bad touching the project because they're like, well, that's my friend's work, and I don't want to correct it because like he made it, but also we need to go forward. It was a really awkward space for them to be in. I always feel terrible when I see fan projects just go away for that reason.
Yeah, I'm trying to thing, but I might be completely wrong because now I can't find anything talking about it. So, which is good. If I'm wrong about somebody dying, that's phenomenal. that's the best thing to be wrong about.
Have you seen those tweets where someone dies and the guy's like, "No, I'm still here. What are you talking about?"
I have seen those. Yeah. Do you have any last minute questions for me? Because I actually will need to wrap up here shortly.
That's perfectly fine. We're pretty much done. The only thing I'm going to ask is there anything you want to shout out at the end? Any type of, Twitter, game stuff you're working on? Last guy I interviewed for some reason refused to and shouted out a pizza place instead. So is there anything you want to shout out here?
Well, if you're not already following me on Twitter, you can find me at JSOZGames. That's JASOZZ Games. That's pretty much where I post everything about the game and what I'm working on and updates and that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, I don't really know if there's. I don't think I've got a local pizza place worth shouting out, honestly.
Well, with that regards, thank you for being on the show, Jason. And stay tuned for the next episode of the Paper Prototypes podcast.